Welcome to this demonstration of SALUIT, a new state-of-the-art tool for the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority to help local planners with cross-domain planning at a local scale connected to regional context, resources, and data. SALUIT stands for Small Area Land Use Impact Tool. SALUIT is built as an extension of ArcGIS and CommunityViz mapping and analysis tools. Any user can create a project by choosing a site and surrounding study area. SALUIT then builds a CommunityViz project file, including data stored from a regional database clipped to the project area extents. A user may also choose to add local data or supersede regional data with local sources. Once you've installed the SALUIT add-on, you are ready to create a new project. I am going to start with a blank ArcMap session to create my project. To begin, I will click on this button to create a new project. When I do, I get a dialog window to specify my project parameters, and I get a locator map. This might take a few seconds to load. I know I want to create my project in Jersey City, so I will zoom in on the map. The more I zoom, the faster the map will respond. I will also see more details, such as census blocks and parcel boundaries. I am now ready to build my project area. First, I will give my project a name. I can also provide an optional brief description of my project. The drop-down at the top allows me to select an analysis template. We will explain more about templates later in this demo. So for now, I will just accept the SALUIT standard as the default template. My project area will be defined at two scales, study area and project site. You can think of the study area as the context, neighborhood or other surrounding area for my project. I will make this relatively broad to start with, but not so big my project will be unwieldy. Since the area I'm working on is on a slant, I will use the Select by Polygon method. This works much like other ArcGIS and mapping selection tools. I click corner points, and when I'm ready to complete, I will double-click. When the query completes, I will see a bold black outline for the area selected. This is based on census blocks, the green lines on the map. If I'm mostly happy with the boundary, but want to add or subtract a few blocks, I can use the Select by Point to modify my query. You can see as I click on various areas of the map, my boundary adjusts accordingly. Now I will zoom in a little to get to my project area. This is where I will be proposing changes for future development. It must be within my study area boundary. My project will be based on the Powerhouse Arts District of Jersey City. If I know which parcels are in this district, I can use similar selection tools as the study area to pick the parcels right on the map. Those are the gray boundary lines. Selected features will display with a black boundary and a crosshatch. For advanced users, you may have a boundary file that defines your project site or study area, and you simply want to call on that boundary. You can bring in this boundary as a map layer. Clicking Advanced Options for Define Project Area brings up some new buttons. Now I can select, using ArcGIS selection tools, the features on the map which will define my project site. Once selected, you will see that the buttons for Import Feature Shape are now lit up. I will click on the one under Define Project Site to use the imported shapes as my boundary. Once this is done, you will see the project area for my project boundary adjust on the map. And that's pretty much all there is to setting up a new project. When I click Create Project, I will launch a setup process which can be lengthy depending on my choices for project and study area. If I leave this box checked, I will not only download all of the data content and modeling template for my study area, I will also trigger the analysis to do a complete first run. This is important so I can see the indicator results immediately. If I uncheck this box, my model will still build, but I will then have the option to make some adjustments before the first run. You may choose to do this if you don't have time to let your computer run through a full update, or if you want to change some of the project's layers through loading local data. Since I have some time and I want to explore the results from the regional defaults first, I am going to keep this box checked for a full run. Once the project is built, you can open the file to explore extensive information on the existing and possible future alternatives for your project area. In this example, we are looking at a neighborhood in Jersey City. The black outline shows the general extent of our study area, with property parcels colored in tan. The project site is represented here with this black hatching. We have two alternatives which we will explore. Both are built on some extensive data sets grouped in thematic categories. You can see we have data on boundaries, census areas, facilities, infrastructure, environmental features, and land use and parcel data. You may have also noticed some charts here providing information about our study area and project site. I'll click forward on my saved views to bring up the existing land use. This data, along with the census numbers, provides some information about how many houses, people, and employees there are in my study area and site, and where they are approximately located on the map. I also have a few other charts about existing conditions. This one, Commute Shed, helps me understand how many jobs are within 60 minutes of drive time or train on the existing networks. Transit score is one measure that NJTPA uses to help understand how transit-ready an area is. The higher the score, the more transit-ready, and here in Jersey City, we are not surprisingly scoring very high. Now let's take a closer look at the project site, which happens to be the Powerhouse Arts District. Here we have the existing land use and the same information from the previous charts all on one site summary chart. This will be helpful as we begin to think about alternatives for this area. We can continue looking at saved views to explore more information about existing conditions. This next series will explore transit and access. First, we are looking at local bus service. There is a network service area defining quarter-mile, half-mile, and 1-mile distance along the network to area bus stops. We are then able to measure how many jobs and people are within these distance zones. We also have measured straight-line distances and weighted them by population and employment to get the average distances for our study area and site. We use the same method to look at regional bus and ferry stops. Here we're starting with half miles, since these regional stops are typically able to capture people at greater distances. And finally, we're also looking at train stops, including light rail and path. This final view for existing characteristics of our project area is looking at floodplain. You can see that much of this area is within the floodplain, including all of our project site. We are able to quantify this in terms of housing units within the floodplain. Now we are ready to look at some alternative land uses for the site. As I mentioned at the start, we have two scenarios we've been exploring here. I can view them side by side. The land uses we are proposing are seen here in the table of contents. This list of uses, which you can think of as our paint palette, is a default starting palette for the project and is somewhat customized to the project location you choose. We can make changes to our project here in Alternative B. You simply select a new use, pick the Painter tool, and apply it to any feature in our site. That status bar is doing real-time updates to many of the calculations for our future alternative. Those can be viewed in charts. There's lots of information to process, so let's assume we are happy with our land use changes and we want to go through the impacts more thematically. I will save my edits and click Forward to get to a view on flood impacts. Since the project site is completely within the floodplain, all of my future proposed housing units fall within the floodplain. Next up is a view on roadway system impacts. This has things like trips produced and miles traveled by people living in my future site. I can compare my two sites to see how they differ on these metrics. Next, we can take a closer look at mode share for the new trips. Since this is a very urban place, The travel is distributed somewhat equally among the available travel options. This differs somewhat from our benchmark chart, which shows more regional averages. Parking needs is explored from both a non-residential and a residential perspective. Since this is an urban core site, we are factoring these numbers based on car ownership and historic trip attractions for businesses. Environmental impacts is looking at things like energy, emissions, and impervious surfaces generated from our site uses. You may have noticed these dashed lines throughout the analysis, which typically represent regional averages for similar places in the northern New Jersey region. At this point, you may be asking, but where do these numbers come from? The values behind impacts for future change come from a variety of regional, state, and national sources, and are typically housed in tables in the analysis. Let's look at the land use palette table, for instance. See here on the left are those paints we've been assigning to site features, and each column in this table represents values which might inform an impact calculation of your land use decisions. This table has some defaults, which come from those regional sources with best local information. But if you have better knowledge of some particular value for your local project, you can simply adjust the table numbers and the model will automatically adjust. In addition to transit accessibility, we have also explored accessibility to things like parks. One of the customizable options is also to use a local dataset, which we've called points of interest. In this case, we are showing the trees layer, but if the user could substitute any local point data, such as police or fire stations, cultural facilities, or other access area of interest. The municipal costs view examines the fiscal impacts of the project, how much a city of this size would typically spend, and how much local, state, and federal tax revenue a project might generate. Finally, we can circle back to the beginning and look at how our accessibility from our new site alternatives is shaping up as it relates to our transit facilities. This has been a brief tour of SALUIT. There is much more detailed help available online in the SALUIT user documentation. This document can help with troubleshooting issues, explaining processes, and providing more detailed background information on calculations. We hope you will get a chance to explore further while creating your own projects. One of the many benefits of SALUIT is providing a package of regionally sourced data for use in a SALUIT project. You may need to download this data directly to refresh a project previously created, or if there was an interruption in the original download. You may also just want to obtain this data for another purpose. To download the data, begin by creating a new Community Viz analysis. I have pre-added my study area boundary layer so I can create my project with this content in place. The download data process will be looking for the layer's study area boundary, so rename your layer if it's different at all. Then you can simply click the Download Data button. Since I didn't include the project site boundary, the site-level parcel data was not downloaded. This process will pull all of the data for your study area and store it in your analysis in the data folder under Cloud Data Geodatabase.